Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Today, we're going to start covering Unit 3 of AP World. Unit 3 of AP World is land based empires, and this takes us to finally a new time period, the period 1450 to 1750. What we're going to call the early modern time period. And there's just a ton of stuff that happens in this time period. The curriculum breaks it up into two distinct units. This one is the land based empires, Unit 3, and then Unit 4 is going to be the maritime empires of the same time period. So, to contextualize first this entire unit, let's keep in mind that during this time period, the Europeans are going to build up a lot of maritime empires like the Spanish Empire throughout much of the Americas. The Portuguese are going to build up empire in Brazil and Angola, and of course the establishment of the trading post empire that they have all throughout the Indian Ocean trade network. The Dutch are going to build up their empire in Indonesia, but this unit is going to focus more on the land-based empires. So, first thing to note is that the Ming dynasty of China is going to end up giving way to the Qing dynasty, which is led by Manchus. Japan is going to have some interaction, especially with the Spanish, but then close itself off to foreign interactions. India, most of South Asia, is going to get conquered. So the Sultanate of Delhi will give way to the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire and the Safavid Empire in what we now know as Iran and the Ottoman Empire will control much of the Mediterranean basin area. These three empires right here, we oftentimes will collectively call just the three gunpowder empires, the three empires throughout, Eurasia mostly, but Afro-Eurasia to a degree with the Ottomans. Russia will expand east tremendously in this time period. In fact, even taking control of much of what we now know as Alaska. In West Africa, the Empire of Mali will end up giving way to the new empire that's called Songhai. And in the Americas, there's a few land based empires also, the Incan Empire and the Aztec Empire. Both of those would end up getting defeated in this time period by the Spanish. And the next thing to mention is there's a bunch of buildings that are built up throughout the world in this time period that are some of the most iconic buildings in the entire world. The Mughals will build up the Taj Mahal. The French will build up the Palace of Versailles. The Blue Mosque will be built in Istanbul. St. Basil's Cathedral will be built up. Coricancha, the Sun Temple, will be built up in the Incan Empire, and the Edo Castle will also be mentioned. So that takes us to key concept 3.1. Empires expand. Imperial expansion relied on the increased use of gunpowder, cannons, and armed trade to establish empires in both hemispheres. So again, the cannons, gunpowder had been spread, especially throughout Eurasia, by the Mongols. The three gunpowder empires in particular are going to be noted for their use of gunpowder and cannons. And additionally, the Europeans that build up their maritime empires are going to use cannons to help to spread their influence throughout the world and to help to conquer the Americas, for example. Keep in mind, before the Columbian Exchange, the Americans did not have cannons and gunpowder. Those were brought to the Americas by the Spanish and the Portuguese, and the Spanish and the Portuguese, to a lesser extent in this time period, the English and the French, will use gunpowder to help establish their empires in the Americas. Land-based empires included the Manchus in Central and East Asia, the Mughals in South and Central Asia, the Ottoman Empire in Southern Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, and the Safavids throughout much of what is now Iran, primarily in the Middle East. The Manchus were from this region up here, northeast of the Great Wall. uh, a powerful military state in Northeast Eurasia, declared the founding of the Qing dynasty in the early 17th century. They conquered Beijing in 1644, and hence we usually talk about the Manchu or the Qing dynasty starting in 1644, and we're going to see this dynasty ruling over China all the way up until 1911. And the core of Ming China by the end of the century, but they continued to expand into Central Eurasia, creating China's largest enduring empire. Their most formidable rivals were the Mongols, which were organized into something called the Jungar Khanate, which dominated Western Mongolia and Xinjiang and Tibet. Through daring military expeditions, adroit diplomacy, and extensive economic mobilization, the Qing rulers eliminated the Jungar state, established uncontested power over much of Central Eurasia. After the conquest, the Manchus consolidated control of the region with productive economic policies, with extensive surveying and mapping, and by producing an official count of their military achievements. Qing expansion and Jungar resistance left strong legacies for the definition of the territory of the empire and the Chinese nation that succeeded it into the 20th century. Next up is South Asia, which ends up getting conquered. The Sultanate of Delhi is defeated by the Mughals. Mughal is just another name for Mongols. Founded in 1526, the Mughal Empire expanded during the late 16th and 17th centuries across almost the entire Indian subcontinent, except for the very southern tip, which is very difficult to conquer. At its peak, the empire contained roughly 1.24 million square miles and about 150 million people, which is about half the size of Western Europe in size, but double its population. The imperial dynasty was originally Turco-Mongol, but especially under the reign of Emperor Akbar, which just translates to the Great, and by the way, he gave himself that name. The dynasty established the Mughal Empire by incorporating Hindu and other Indian cultures and mobilizing India's human and natural resources more effectively than any previous state had done there. Nonetheless, emperors almost constantly faced rebellions and revolts by rival members of the dynasty, by imperial administrators, by army commanders, regional rulers, and popular movements. By the early 18th century, the empire fragmented into successor states, but the dynasty remained on the throne until 1858 when the British Empire finally displaced it. In the Middle East region, the Ottoman Empire started out with this tiny little state here, but expanded over the years. Most important in this expansion was 1453 with Mehmed II, who led the Turks in seizing the ancient city of Constantinople and renamed it Istanbul. So in 1453, we usually talk about the Byzantine Empire finally completely collapsing and the Ottoman Empire beginning to control the extent of its reach with its capital city in this new city of Istanbul, which was prior the city of Constantinople. And they made it the capital of the Ottoman Empire. By 1517, Syria, Arabia, Palestine, and Egypt were under Ottoman control. The Ottoman sultans became so powerful that they were able to declare themselves to be the caliphs or the successors to the prophet Muhammad. The Ottoman Empire reached its peak between 1520 and 1566 under the reign of this guy, Suleiman the Magnificent, who is one of the most powerful rulers in the Mediterranean basin history. Throughout Sultan Suleiman's rule, the empire expanded and included areas of Eastern Europe. In the Middle East, however, the Safavids took control of Persia at the start of the 16th century, which marks the start of modern Persia. Safavids trace their origins back to a Sufi order, which is a mystical sect within Islam, associated with Sheikh Safi al-Din, who lived from 1252 to 1334. The Safavids, sometime around 1400, adopted affiliation with a different type of Islam called Shi'ism. and undertook to spread their Shiite faith by force of arms. Shah Ismail, who lived from 1487 to 1524, is usually considered as the starting point for the Safavid dynasty. In 1501, after the capture of the city of Tabriz, he assumed the title of Shah of Azerbaijan and declared his independence from the Ottoman Empire. With his military conquest continuing, he expanded Safavid control of territory south of the Caucasus Mountains. Shah Abbas the Great, from 1587 to 1629, is perhaps the most significant of the emperors of the Safavid dynasty. He incorporated slaves of the royal household into the army, similar to the Janissaries in the Ottoman Empire. And he adopted gunpowder weapons and received European assistance. He attacked and successfully defeated the nomadic Uzbeks and expelled the Portuguese in the Persian Gulf region and harassed the Ottoman Empire during his reign. His campaigns brought most of northwestern Iran, the Caucasus, and Mesopotamia under Safavid rule. Political and religious disputes led to rivalries and conflicts between states. This includes the conflict between the Safavids and the Mughals. A series of wars were fought between those two over mostly what is modern-day Afghanistan, particularly the city of Kandahar. These conflicts were primarily between the years of 1649 and 1653. Next is Songhai conflict with Morocco. The main reason was to seize control of and try to revive the trans-Saharan trade in salt and gold. The Songhai Empire was defeated and fell to the Moroccans and their gunpowder in 1591. Ladies and gentlemen, that's key concept 3.1.